My name is Grace, and I am 75 years old. My world is a small, quiet kingdom whose borders are defined by the white picket fence that surrounds my home. Every clapboard on this house, every pane of glass, represents a piece of my life, a memory of my late husband, Arthur, and a testament to a lifetime of careful saving and diligent work. We paid off the mortgage 17 years ago, and the day we burned the deed in our little backyard fire pit was one of the proudest of my life. This house was more than just an asset. It was my security, my sanctuary, the place I intended to live out the rest of my days, surrounded by the gentle ghosts of a happy life. My only child, David, was the sun in my solitary sky. He was my late-in-life baby, a charming, handsome boy who grew into a charming, handsome man. He worked as a financial advisor, and his easy confidence and quick smile could sell sunshine to a snowman. I was so proud of him, so sure of the brilliant future that lay before him. His love was a warm blanket against the chill of my widowhood, and I trusted him implicitly, with an absoluteness that only a mother can have for her son. It was this trust, this pure, unadulterated love, that he would later sharpen into a weapon and use to gut my world from the inside out. The betrayal was not a single, violent act, but a slow, quiet poisoning that began years ago. David had arrived at my house one afternoon in a flurry of papers and purpose. "Mom," he'd said, his voice a smooth, reassuring hum, "just some routine tax and estate papers to streamline everything. It'll protect you down the line." He spread a dozen documents across my dining room table, a daunting forest of fine print and legal jargon. He pointed and I signed, my hand guided by his confident explanations. "This just standardizes your tax filings. This one is for the estate to avoid probate. This one helps me manage your accounts if you ever get sick." I didn't read them. Why would I? This was my David, my protector, the financial wizard who was securing my future. I would have sooner read the terms and conditions on a bottle of milk. I had no idea that amongst the benign tax forms and estate documents, there was one paper, a general power of attorney, that was a key. A key that gave him the legal right to do anything he wanted with my name, my credit, and my home. A key I had just unknowingly handed over to the man who would, in time, become my plunderer. Life continued in its peaceful, predictable rhythm. David would visit for Sunday dinners, always arriving in a car that seemed a little too fancy, wearing a watch that seemed a little too expensive. He spoke of successful investments and lavish client dinners. I saw these as signs of his success, the fruits of his hard work. I now see they were the fruits of my life savings, harvested without my knowledge. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong arrived on a rainy Tuesday in a plain white envelope. It was from Sterling Trust Bank. I assumed it was junk mail, but something about the official lettering made me pause. I opened it to find a single, terrifying word in bold, red letters at the top of the page: foreclosure. I stared at the paper, my mind refusing to process the information. It had to be a mistake, a clerical error. The notice claimed that the property at my address was 3 months delinquent on a mortgage of $250,000. The loan, it said, had been taken out 2 years ago. I laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. I hadn't had a mortgage in 17 years. I picked up the phone to call the bank, my heart fluttering with the mild annoyance of someone about to correct a stranger's foolish mistake. I had no idea I was about to step through a doorway into a nightmare from which there was no easy return. The voice on the other end of the phone at the bank was a cold, impersonal drone of corporate procedure. I explained the situation, my voice light, expecting a quick apology and a promise to rectify the error. Instead, the woman asked for my social security number. After a long pause filled with the clicking of a keyboard, she came back on the line. "Ma'am, our records show a home equity loan was issued to you 2 years ago for the amount of $250,000. The application was signed by your son, David, under a power of attorney filed with this office." The world tilted and went gray. The receiver felt slippery in my hand. Power of attorney, the papers, the routine tax papers. A wave of nausea so profound it buckled my knees washed over me. "The payments have been made consistently until 3 months ago," the woman continued, oblivious to the fact that my entire world was collapsing. "As of today, you are 92 days overdue. If payment is not received, the foreclosure proceedings will continue." I hung up the phone without another word. My house, was silent, but my mind was screaming. TW. $150,000. He had stolen my home, my security, my past, and my future, all while smiling at me over Sunday dinner. The loving son was a phantom, a con man with my eyes and my heart, and I had been his willing, adoring victim. When I confronted David, he didn't even try to deny it. I drove to his glossy, downtown apartment, the foreclosure notice clutched in my hand like a death sentence. He opened the door, and his charming smile vanished the moment he saw my face. He ushered me inside and collapsed onto his expensive leather sofa before I could even speak, his head in his hands. The confession came out in a torrent of self-pitying sobs. He'd made bad investments, he'd gotten in with the wrong crowd, he'd been living beyond his means to impress a woman. The excuses were as plentiful as they were pathetic. He had used the power of attorney, he said, as a temporary solution, a way to get a quick infusion of cash that he was sure he could pay back before I ever found out. "I was going to fix it, Mom, I swear," he wept, tears streaming down his face. "I just fell behind, but I'll fix it now. I'll get the money, I promise." In that moment, watching my son cry, a part of me, the mother in me, wanted to wrap my arms around him, to tell him we would figure it out together. But then I looked around his apartment, at the abstract art on the walls, the top-of-the-line entertainment system, the designer clothes spilling out of an open closet. This was my home. He was living inside the walls of my stolen security. His tears were not for me. They were for himself, for the fact that his long con had finally come to an end. I left his apartment with his empty promises echoing in my ears, my heart a frozen, heavy stone in my chest. The mother in me had gone silent, and in her place, a different woman was beginning to emerge, a woman I hadn't met before. She was cold, she was furious, and she was about to fight for her life. Weeks crawled by, and David's promises revealed themselves to be the hollow things I knew they were. He stopped answering my calls. The bank's notices became more frequent, the language more threatening. The foreclosure date was set. I was to be evicted from my own home in 60 days. The helplessness was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket of despair. I was a 75-year-old pensioner, David had my power of attorney, and the bank had a legally signed document. I was trapped. My love for my son, the great, unconditional love that had defined my life, began to curdle. It transmuted into something else, something I had never felt before, a protective, primal fury. This house was not just wood and nails, it was Arthur's legacy. It was my independence. It was the last piece of the world that was truly mine, and I would not let it be stolen from me by anyone, not even my own son. One evening, sitting in the dim light of my living room, the television on for the noise more than anything, a commercial came on. It was a slick, heartwarming advertisement for Sterling Trust Bank. It featured a kindly, silver-haired actor playing a grandfather, surrounded by his loving family. The voiceover was smooth and reassuring. "In a world of uncertainty," it purred, "you need a bank you can trust. Sterling Trust Bank, protecting our seniors from financial fraud." I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. It was them. The very institution that was enabling my son's fraud, the bank that was preparing to throw me out onto the street, was spending millions of dollars to publicly brand themselves as the guardians of the elderly. The hypocrisy was so breathtaking, so audacious, that I almost laughed. And in that moment, I saw it. I saw my path forward. I saw my weapon. David had used the bank to ruin me. I would use the bank's own hypocrisy to ruin him. My plan was simple, and its simplicity was its strength. I would not fight David in a court of law. I would not engage in a messy, public family drama. I would fight the bank in the court of public opinion. The next morning, I put on my Sunday best, a modest dress and a simple cardigan. I gathered my documents, the foreclosure notice, the original deed to my paid-off house, and a photograph of Arthur and me on the day we moved in. I did not look like a warrior. I looked like what I was, a frail, respectable old woman who had been grievously wronged. I was the perfect victim, and I would play that part to perfection. My first stop was the regional headquarters of Sterling Trust Bank, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. I was stopped at the front desk, of course, a low-level employee trying to send me to a call center. I refused to move. I asked, politely but firmly, to speak to the regional manager, a Mr. Harrison. I sat in the lobby for 2 hours, a quiet, stubborn statue of defiance, until finally, annoyed and intrigued, he agreed to see me. Mr. Harrison was a man in an expensive suit with a practiced, corporate smile. He listened to my story with an air of detached patience. When I was finished, he gave me a condescending little shrug. "Mrs. Miller," he said, While your situation is unfortunate from the bank's perspective, the loan is perfectly legal. We have a valid power of attorney on file. Our hands are tied." "Are they?" I asked, my voice soft. I pushed the photo of my husband and me across his desk. "Mr. Harrison, I was 73 years old when this loan was approved. I live on a small pension. How is it that your bank, a bank that prides itself on protecting seniors, could issue a $250,000 loan to a retiree without ever meeting her? Without a single phone call to verify she was even aware of the transaction? Do you not find that to be a failure of your own security protocols?" His smile tightened. "The documents were in order." "I see," I said, gathering my things. "Well, I'm sure my next appointment will be very interested to hear about your bank's definition of an order." "Next appointment?" he asked, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Yes," I said, standing up. "I'm meeting with an investigative reporter from Channel 4 News this afternoon to tell my story. I think the public will be very interested to learn how Sterling Trust Bank protects its senior citizens." I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him sitting there, his practiced smile finally gone, replaced by a look of dawning, horrified comprehension. The meeting with the reporter, a sharp, empathetic woman named Susan, was everything I had hoped for. I told her the entire story, framing it exactly as I had with Mr. Harrison, not as a story about a bad son, but as a story about a big bank's negligence. I was the perfect sympathetic figure, the grieving widow, the doting mother, the victim of a system that had failed to protect her. Susan saw the power of the narrative immediately. It was a classic David and Goliath story, and the bank's own advertising campaign was the sling I was handing her. The moment our meeting ended, Susan's first call was to the Sterling Trust Bank Public Relations Department, asking for their official comment on a story about their failure to protect a senior citizen from financial ruin, in direct contradiction of their latest advertising campaign. The effect, I was later told, was like throwing a lit match into a room full of gasoline. The PR department, who had just spent millions crafting their image as the protectors of the elderly, went into a state of pure, unadulterated panic. My story, especially if it aired on the evening news, would make them a laughingstock, a case study in corporate hypocrisy. It would be a PR nightmare from which they might never recover. The call from Mr. Harrison's office came less than an hour later. His tone was no longer condescending. It was urgent, placating, almost begging. He asked me to come back to the bank, to meet with him and their legal team. The power had shifted. They were no longer the ones holding the cards. I was. The second meeting was in a large, intimidating boardroom, but I was no longer intimidated. I sat at the head of the table, a small old woman in a simple dress, while a team of expensive lawyers and panicked executives danced around the issue. They tried to offer me settlements, payment plans, anything to make the story go away. I refused. "There is only one solution," I said, my voice unwavering. "This loan was obtained through fraud. It is not my debt, and I will not pay a penny of it. You will cancel this mortgage, you will clear my title, and you will absorb the loss that your own negligence created." The head lawyer began to bluster about the legality of the power of attorney, but I cut him off. "The law is a slow and expensive process," I said. "A story on the 6 o'clock news is fast, and for you, it will be far more costly. The choice is yours." They knew I had them cornered. To fight me would be to confirm their own culpability in the court of public opinion. To save their precious reputation, they had to make me whole. And they had to find a villain for the story, a scapegoat to prove that they were the good guys after all. And my son, David, was the perfect candidate. The bank's legal team drafted an agreement. They would declare the loan fraudulent, nullify the entire mortgage, and clear my title to the house, free and clear. In return, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement and refuse to speak to the media. To demonstrate their commitment to protecting seniors, their final act was to announce that they were filing a criminal complaint against the true perpetrator, my son, David, for bank fraud and elder abuse. They were going to use the full force of their legal arsenal to prosecute him. They were offering me my home back in exchange for my son's freedom. I signed the papers without a moment's hesitation. Today, I am sitting in my living room in my house, which is mine again, completely and irrevocably. The foreclosure, no. Tice is gone, replaced by a fresh, clean title deed that sits on my mantelpiece. I am safe. I am secure. I won. The bank, in its frantic effort to avoid a PR disaster, became the instrument of my salvation. They fired the loan officer who had rubber-stamped the application, and they pursued my son with a relentless, terrifying efficiency. David was arrested last month. His charm and his tears were useless against a corporate giant seeking to make an example of him. He is facing a long prison sentence. I got to watch as the very institution he had used as a weapon was the one that ultimately took him down, a perfect, terrible, and exquisitely just outcome. My victory, however, is a silent, lonely one. The threat is gone, but so is my son. I saved my home, my sanctuary, but I had to sacrifice the last living piece of my heart to do it. The house is quiet now, the silence a constant reminder of the terrible price of my survival. I am the queen of my small, quiet kingdom once again, but I am its sole inhabitant, and the silence of my victory is the most profound sound I have ever known.